Welcome everybody. It's March 10th. Excited to get our executive committee meeting going. I'll call this meeting to order. Item number 2 is vote on the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
This is Sarah. I have 2 comments. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah.
A comment and a question. One, I'm sorry I have a difficult last name, but it is swapped around a few times throughout the minutes, if that could just be corrected.
Sure.
And then on, let's see here, I'm sorry, I had it pulled up and then it closed. There is a motion only on one item, but no second listed. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it here. And I didn't know if we needed to confirm that one.
My motion was to approve the agenda.
Oh,
Yeah, not the meeting
I
minutes.
did that again. Joe, I swear I hear agenda and I hear minutes.
I understand completely. Is there a second to approve the agenda?
Yes, second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 3 is the approval of the meeting minutes. And Mayor Kurowski, why don't you give us some of the changes that you've noticed?
Sorry, just updating the spelling of my name. And
Yep.
Tracy, if you're on, and because now I'm struggling to find it, there was a note where Coleman motioned there, item 22, approval of policy agenda. A motion was made by Coleman, no second was noted.
Yeah, I listened to the recording and there was no second on that.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
I wasn't participating or I would have said something at the time, but I wasn't at that meeting. So
I must have missed it myself, so apologize.
Okay, all right. Thank you for clarifying.
All right, any other questions or comments? I would take a motion to approve the meeting minutes with the changes that we've noted by Mayor Kurowski.
Motion.
Move approval. Second.
You can pick
All
one,
right.
Chick.
Reva first and Ted was second, just so you have it, Tracy, because I knew there was some question marks on there. So we'll make sure that we make it clear for you.
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Any comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 4 is consent and vote on contracts and expenses. Todd, you'll briefly run through this.
Yeah, thank you. Real quick, the MPO would like to purchase some trail counters. These would be permanent trail counters. We have some trail counters that can be put at various locations. They're not permanently installed. They're fairly old, so we need to start replacing them anyway. The other advantage of these counters would be that they send the data to us automatically every day. You don't have to go out and physically touch the unit and pull the data out of the unit. So it would save a lot of time on our staff and our community staffs when they're using them as well. So we want to purchase 3 of these to test them out, one before we make a bigger purchase, but also just to start replacing old equipment. We have funds in the budget under our equipment budget for this. It's a little over $13,000. I'd recommend approval.
Any questions or comments?
This is Dylan. I just want to note that the amount of the agenda is the correct amount, which is 14,575. The amount on the screen is wrong. Apologize for that.
Okay.
I'll move.
I just have a quick question. If these work, what will the transition look like, and can we make this as a specific line item in the budget so we understand what what was the section you listed it under? Equipment?
Equipment.
This is under equipment. Yeah, well, in the next budget cycle, assuming these work out the way we anticipate them, we would include, an item to start replacing our counters. It won't be all of them at once because they are not inexpensive, but we want to start replacing those just to get updated equipment and also just ease of use for everyone.
I think it would be nice for future planning to demonstrate since it will be significant, like year 1, the amount 5 of 60. I don't know how many there are.
Yeah.
So we understand where we're at in that progress.
Yeah, we can do that.
Thanks.
Do you, Todd, do you know where these are going to be placed at, these three? Where we're switching them out at?
We're still working with our member communities on that because we will need them to help with the installation. So we're deciding where the best places are. Those working with the bike ped committee on that. We'll report back on those locations to you though.
Yeah, will you just shoot us an email or report back some way, let us know where that's going to be, where they're going to be?
Sure.
Any other comments or questions? All right, this is a voting item, so we would entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second, Reba.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 5 is report and vote on the final 2020 audit report. Todd?
Yeah, just real quick, and Joe and Dave were with us last month and went through the audit. And our finance committee also did a fairly extensive review with them in February. A copy of the final audit was emailed out yesterday. We have to submit this in April to the state. We would recommend approval. We are working through their findings, which will have some updates later on about some of the items.
Any questions for Todd or any of the staff? Comments?
This is Sarah. I motion to approve and accept the fiscal year 2020 audit.
Second, Reba.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 6, a report and vote on fiscal year 2022 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget Development. Dylan.
Thank you. So we are here, we need to approve the draft budget and get it to the Iowa DOT by the end of the month. Just as a reminder, the work program and budget outlines what we're going to do over the next fiscal year, which starts July 1st. Some of the requirements that are placed upon us by the US government are addressed in the work program and the budget part of that. I won't go through this in too much detail because we've seen this a few times. A few projects that we've identified that you'll see in the draft report for this year, and some of these were in this year's budget or this year's work program as well, but we're carrying them through or going to put more emphasis on them this year. The regional ITS architecture, which we had a presentation on that last month at policy committee, a traffic safety study, a goods movement or freight study, some strategic trail planning and bike ped planning, further analysis of our growth scenario that was developed in the last long range plan, and then some climate change best practice integration to help communities that are forming their own climate task force and so forth. In terms of the revenue or the budget side of things, here we're showing revenue. This is the same information I showed at the policy committee last month, but at the executive committee, we didn't quite have this in here yet, I don't believe. The one notable change from what we've done in years past is we put the large grants for the build or for the transload and the water trails in here to show those funding so we can show the flow through of money coming in and then money being paid out on those. So this is the revenue made up of our US DOT funds, member assessments, and our contracts. In terms of expenses, again, this is the same information that was shown before with the inclusion of those 2 grants. The one change to this was the change to fringe benefits to add in the life insurance issue that we talked about at the last meeting for the director. So that's been shown in here now. Other than that, these are the same numbers we showed you last month. A couple of the other notes, again, these have not really changed. Up there, we show what the various consultant contracts that we're anticipating are and the amounts up on the upper left. We have our contracts that we're anticipating on the lower left, and then a couple of their assumptions, such as going back to $1 per capita and anticipating either or maybe both additional administrative position, but also some sort of financial bookkeeping consultant putting in that into the budget. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the agenda too. So with that, that's what we have for the work program and budget. there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, we'd ask for your approval to send this draft to the Iowa DOT.
This is Sarah. Sorry, I do have a question. On going back to water trails, because we haven't had to have the cash flow conversation yet. With a typical budget format, we would show the money in, money out. When will we and how will we be able to demonstrate the coverage of the $6 million of the water trails build grant?
Todd or Zach, do you have an update on what the agreements are
Yeah.
with?
Central Iowa Water Trails is going to be putting money into an account, a separate account that the MPO will have access to provide the matching funds. So we would have access to that as we seek for reimbursement and to pay for the invoices as we go through the pay items.
Okay.
So that'll be set up in advance of any, construction over the next several months here before we get into building the actual project.
Okay. Okay.
Todd, I know there was some talk of kind of a gap line of credit that they'll also have. Is that still going to happen?
Yeah, they're still working with Bankers Trust, I believe, on that.
Yeah.
So,
There's some gap funding. I believe they will have a significant line of credit.
yeah, just in case they need it, they'll have that available to them as well.
Right. Any other questions for Todd or comments? This is a voting item, so I'd entertain a motion.
So moved, McCoy.
Is there
Second
a
by
second?
Andewig. Second by Andewig.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 7 is report and vote on fiscal year 2021 through 2024 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment from Shiroshi.
Yes, thank you very much. So the item before you is an amendment request from the MPO staff to include the Des Moines Transload facility project into the TIP. As you all know, the Des Moines Transload facility was awarded a build grant in 2018. The MPO staff and Des Moines Industrial have provided the FRA with all the documentation that is required prior to seeking reimbursement through the build grant. So in preparation for the first reimbursement request, the MPO staff is requesting that the TIP be amended to include this project. So with that, if you have any questions about the amendment request, I'll be happy to take them at this time. Otherwise, we are seeking an approval of the amendment. Thank you.
Thanks, Shiroshi. Any questions or comments? All right, I hear none. I'd entertain a motion.
I'd move it, Joe. McCoy.
Second. Thanks, Ted. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 8 is report and vote on fiscal year 2021, 2024 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment from Shiroshi.
Yes, thank you. This is also an amendment request for the B-cycle expansion project. As you all might recall, the MPO had awarded some TAP funds for this project, and the project is programmed in fiscal year 2021. We have received an amendment request from the applicant to update some of the B-cycle stations that were proposed as part of the project. Just to give you an overview, as part of the B-cycle expansion, the applicant was looking at adding an additional 12 B-cycle stations across the metro area, as well as addition of electric powered bicycles to the fleet. With the amendment request, a couple locations that were proposed through the TAP grant, specifically at Waterworks Park and Windsor Heights, are being requested to be removed because they have received additional funding. And as a result, they want the description and the map and the scope to be updated within the TIP to reflect that. The funding that becomes available as a result of this additional funding and these two locations being taken out would be utilized towards purchase of additional electric assist bicycles, which would be added to the larger B-cycle fleet across the metro region. So with that, staff supports the amendment request by the applicant. And if you have any questions about the amendment, I'll be happy to take them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, this is a voting item. So I would entertain a motion.
This
Move
is Sarah,
approval.
I motion. Okay, I'll second.
All right, moved by Weaver, second by Karowski. Tracy, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 9 is report and vote on the Secretary Treasurer Office appointment. Todd, you can give us a brief update. Maybe I'll just jump in real quick. Mayor Karowski has served as our Secretary and Treasurer last year. She's taken on more of a role in her daytime job that she's unable to fulfill her duties as she would feel she needed to. And so she asked if she can resign from that position, still stay on the exec board, but asked if I could find someone else to appoint. And I had spoken with Mayor Andewig, and I believe he would serve very well in this position. Hopefully everyone would agree and we would vote on that. Todd, I don't know if you have anything to add, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah, just that our bylaws require that the executive committee vote on the appointment. So that's why it's a voting item.
Yep.
I'd move that, Gary.
Second, McCoy.
Excellent. Mayor Andewig, I appreciate you willing to serve, and Mayor Karowski, thank you for your time of serving over the last year. So we sure appreciate it. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 10 is report on fiscal year 2025 transportation alternates program application. And I believe Shiroshi is going to give us an update on that.
Yes, this is just a quick update for you all regarding the federal fiscal year 2025 TAP applications. As you know, this application process was opened up in January of this year. The deadline for the applications was February 26th. And we received a total of 6 applications from our member communities, as you can see in the table here. 4 of those 6 were general bike ped transit type projects. We received 2 safe routes to school project requests as well. As you know, that we had proposed a few edits to the TAP program in order to incentivize safe routes to school applications during this funding cycle. The total TAP funding request is about $2.5 million. And the total available funding for the year 2025 is about roughly $1.2 million. So following this, the rest of the application and award process will follow the rest of the STBG funding cycle. So just wanted to give you a quick update on the projects that we received. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosie. Any questions? Comments? All right, we'll move forward. Item number 11 is just a report on salary and compensation review matrix for Todd. He's going to give us an update on this.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. As part of my annual review, the review committee recommended that a salary and review matrix be developed for future staff reviews. So we started looking around at that, and thanks to Ted, he shared Clive's system with us. So when we looked at that, we looked at a few other MPOs and other organizations and kind of mixed and matched some things, put together a matrix and review criteria. We have shared that with the review committee to get their comment on that in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll bring a full update back to the committee in April with the review matrix criteria and kind of a salary structure for positions as well.
Great idea. Any comments or questions?
Hey, Todd, the top line on that matrix, I'd sent you an email back earlier today, but it's probably useful for the rest of this group. On the top line of that matrix, you're comparing the salaries against some overall number. I'm assuming some average salary. How are you determining that number? Are you comparing it against other MPOs, against other public entities, private entities? How are you coming to that number?
Other MPOs and other local agencies here in the metro as well. And we'll share those with everybody. We're still getting some data for that, so we don't have everything in there that we want to look at before we share that with the committee.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we will move forward. Item number 13 is a report, draft public participation plan and language assistant plan from Dylan.
Back up one, Joe.
Oh, I'm sorry. Item number 12 is accounting reviewing review actions.
Yeah, out of our audit, there was some items that looked to have some further detail specifically on the accounting side of the equation for the MPO. And so we've looked at a few different entities on how to help with looking at our finances and reporting them. We've engaged the CPA Brett Miller and his firm to discuss some options on assisting the MPO's accounting needs. We've talked with them quite a bit, and they're putting together a little bit of a scope for us, and we'll have some more specifics coming out of this. But I think he'll provide a good resource to do some checks for us on the finance side, as well as help make sure all the ledger entries are good going forward. We did get the updated entries from Denman, so we'll have those as a good base to start with, and everything will be leveled up. We still had the issue this past year of the transition from AccuFund to QuickBooks. Now we're past that point, so I think a lot of these issues will go away. But and we're past the previous auditor, which also I think had some issues, unfortunately. So I think we'll be in much better shape this year. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Todd? All right, Todd, just a quick question. Is that something that Denman could provide for us also? Or would you rather use someone different than who does our audit?
They would prefer not to do it.
Okay.
Just to have that separation.
That's what I wondered, but that sounds good.
Good.
Any other questions, comments? We will move on to item 13, which is a report on the draft public participation plan and language assistance plan from Dylan.
Thank you. So this is a requirement of the MPO, one of those things I showed in the earlier work program item that's required of MPOs. There's no real timeline by which we have to have a public participation plan adopted. It's not like the long range plan where it's every 5 years or something, but it's been a long enough time that we feel like we need to go through there and update it. There's also some other regulatory requirements such as Title VI that is required every 3 to 4 years. And that's coming due. So we felt now is a good time to update all of this. So with the public participation plan, this just really provides the public notice of how we can engage with them and documents the things that we're going to do to make sure that we have an open and transparent planning process. So a few things that we've done, we didn't do a wholesale change. We just went through and updated it as necessary. So we have added some sections about how we're doing things now over the last year with doing more online meetings and so forth. And also just reflecting the things we're already doing, but making sure that our public participation plan reflects that. So some of the more virtual things we're doing, putting meetings on YouTube and so forth. We've also updated our media outreach lists and that kind of thing. Related to the public participation plan is the need to have a language assistance plan. And this really just takes a look at what kind of languages are spoken throughout our area. And there's a threshold that's provided to us by the feds that says if a certain language is spoken more prevalently than others, you have to provide an opportunity to engage with them. So we go through a process to identify what those languages are, and then we put processes in place that if someone were to come into the office or call us on the phone or something like that, we have a way to communicate with them. And basically what that looks like is we have some note cards. If someone were to come in and we don't know what they're saying, we can put it in front of them, they can point to their language, and then we have a translation service we can call that can help us through all of that. So that's been updated as well, and noted on there is a few of the languages that we've had to add in there: Polish, Russian, and Arabic. For these plans, we are doing a public comments period that goes through March 31st. So we're accepting comments. We'll have a meeting on March 24th over Zoom to allow the public to weigh in on that. We'll bring all this back to you in April for approval. And we'd like to get this done in April because, as we'll talk about here later, we do have our certification review with USDOT in late April. So this would be a nice thing that they can see we've taken care of it, we're updated and we're current, so that they know that when we do have a review with them. If there's any questions about any of this, I'm happy to address it. There were links to the documents in the agenda packet if you want to read through them. But otherwise, that's what we have for you.
All right. Any questions for Dylan? Dylan, thank you. Appreciate the information. We'll move on to item 14 as a report on community project funding earmarks. Dylan, you'll give us that?
Yes. So some interesting news is that the House Committee on Appropriations a few weeks ago developed and released guidelines for basically bringing back earmarks, which would end a 10-year ban on earmarks. So some key aspects of this, right now it's only in the House, though the Senate is also working on this and is expected to release something similar. They are trying to put a lot of guidelines on these to keep it from getting corrupt and some of the things that plagued it when it was around the first time. A few of the key things are that each member of Congress would be limited to 10 projects. The overall funding cap would be 1% of discretionary funding, which comes out to be about 14 billion. Still not clear if that's over everything and how that would work on when individual bills come up or individual funding packages and so forth. But that's what we know for now. There's also a lot of transparency guidelines. So these would have to be done through an online forum. They'd have to be approved by the committee before they can make it into anything. There'd have to be acknowledgement that no family members of the congressional members are benefiting from this, so on and so forth. They're also not allowing any for-profit entities to apply for these either, or be the recipient of these either. So there's a longer proposal that's included in the agenda packet if you want to read through that. Like I said, this is just the Appropriations Committee's proposal right now. Indications are it would pass, and the Senate is also working on theirs. So still to be determined, but it sounds like it's coming back, and we plan to reach out to our members to find out what we need to do to work with this and make sure that our DC trip list and everything is going to meet what they need for this going forward.
Thank you, Dylan. Any questions for Dylan?
Just a comment. Todd and I are both on an advisory committee for the DC trip as well. And this was brought up the other day too. So I think the partnership's also aware of this. And
Yep.
looking very closely at it too, to see how that might affect the programming for the trip as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's move forward to item 15 is report on the Economic Development District update. Todd.
Sure, thanks. Happy to report that all the 7 counties in the proposed district have passed resolutions of support. So we have that milestone behind us. So that kind of wraps up the phase 1, as you see on this chart. Phase 2, we start pulling together the information and the bylaws and structure to form the entity and kind of the guts of the organization. So you'll be seeing more of that over the next few months. And then the plan is to get to operations hopefully by the end of the year. There you can see when the resolutions were passed by each of the counties. Dallas, Boone, and Marion were the last 3 earlier this month. Go ahead to the next one. We did talk with Debbie Durham at IEDA about this, and she expressed strong support to create this in central Iowa. They'll act as the conduit to the governor's office when we need the governor's office support, and would work with us on the feds as well. So now we'll hold some more stakeholder meetings with the metro communities and the surrounding communities as well, and to get their take on how to form the SEDS, which will have kind of a project list as well as some strategy ideas in there as well. So we'll be working on convening those stakeholder meetings going forward, as well as just some general input meetings as well. I think that was it. Yeah. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Todd. Any questions for Todd? All right, we'll move on to item 16 is an update on the transload facility.
Yes, thank you. Just want to give you a real quick update on the transload facility progress. I don't have a lot for this one. Just a reminder that Des Moines Industrial did close on all their right-of-way acquisitions and everything back in January. They started doing site clearing on March 1, and then they're planning on an official groundbreaking sometime in April. And what we're anticipating is that the first build grant reimbursement that they're going to submit will probably be sometime in late April or early May. Next slide, please. I would just note that there were a couple of us that went out and did a walkthrough of the site last week, and we just took this picture of some of the work they're doing. So it was exciting to see the site with equipment on it and them starting to move dirt around a little bit and take some trees down and just getting ready for the full construction to start here in the next few months. So just wanted to share that image with you. And if you have any questions about the project or anything related to it, I'd be happy to take those questions at this time.
Thanks, Zach. Any questions for Zach? All right. Item 17 is report on the Purple Heart Highway update from Todd.
Yep. Real quick. DOT has scheduled the task force meeting for April 6th. Many of you should have gotten that notice. It's a rather large group, having several DOT folks as well as members of our board, and then communities, and then Farm Bureau and agri processors are also represented in the partnership. We did meet with the Farm Bureau and agri processors, as I mentioned, in February, and kind of talked through their needs and how they'd like to see the facility used. We've met with the governor's staff and IDEA about this, and they seem supportive of the concept. There's obviously things to talk through. We've been reviewing other examples of conversions. We've talked about the Arkansas example. There's a few others where they've converted a highway to an interstate and have slow-moving vehicles on it currently still. So working through those issues, and it'll be a good discussion on April 6th with the DOT.
This is Andy. I could add that getting ready, working on an agenda for that meeting and
going to forward that to you next week to get your review and see
Okay.
how, how that's looking to you. And, beyond that, we'll be sending that out prior to the meeting. And that's the first official task force that I've ever been a part of, or, from my side of it. So, and, we haven't done it a whole lot with the department, but I think it's a good thing. And just trying to make sure I get a handle on covering everything and going from there. So, thanks.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions for Andy or Todd? Todd, let me ask you this. Are we going to try to get a legislative change this session, or are we going to try to work towards that the next session for the state?
I'm going to say we'll probably talk this session about the change needed, but I don't see us getting a strong push until on the next session, to be perfectly honest.
And what committees and folks do you think this would have to get through, and who would kind of carry the torch through the Iowa House and Iowa Senate?
I'm not sure on the Senate. The Transportation Committees, obviously, we have had some conversations with Bizignano on this and on how to proceed, and he's given us some feedback on that. So we'll continue to work with him.
That's on the Senate side. Have you talked to anybody on the House side?
Not directly. The partnership has been the conduit on a lot of that, and I can get you more information on that.
That would be helpful, because as we get, when we all have relationships up there, I mean, that's going to be the time that we're going to need to use those type of relationships and work through it with some of the leadership up there to try to get it done.
Yep.
So any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I had a quick one. In the background material, it mentioned a request from DOT about splitting of costs regarding pavement markers. Is that something that's just being talked about and as an FYI, or is that, I just noticed that wasn't part of the presentation here?
Yeah, that's one of the things they'll want to, assuming this changes to an interstate, there's different pavement markings that are used on interstates as opposed to just a 4-lane highway. They would like and probably ask us to cost share in that. The total cost is a little over 700,000. I think they're proposing we pick up 270. Is that right, Andy?
Yeah, somewhere in there. Yep, that was correct.
On that, so that would be an additional cost to the about 1 million that we had in the report would be to pay for that pavement marking change. So we're about 1.3 now.
All right. Any other questions? Great question. Let's move forward to item number 18, which is the water trails update from Todd.
Yeah, I'll start this off, and then Gabe Nelson from Snyder and Associates may have a few items to add.
Okay.
A little extra detail. We are working through the NEPA process and hope to complete most of that this month and get final approval next month if everything goes well. We have the basic most of the build grant agreement with Federal Highway finalized. There's a couple date changes that needed to be made on it, but we've, I think, finished that. Just waiting it back from OST, the federal office in DC. Discussing various questions on the build grant and the grant process, and some of those comments that we talked about earlier on how the reimbursement process will work and the cash flow. We're working through those issues. Worked with the city of Des Moines on incorporating the city's Birdland Park Master Plan design with design elements of the build grant. We had to massage a couple things, but got through that process with working with the city, and I think we came to a pretty good resolution there. We have completed a draft of initial sub-agreements between the MPOs, Central Iowa Water Trails, and the city, and be sharing that with you later today, early tomorrow. Scott just finished drafting it yesterday, so I was looking through it last night and this morning, After I get through that review, we'll be sharing it with the committee just to give you a heads up. I'm sure there'll be some changes from both organizations going forward, but give you an idea of what we're looking at. Gabe, let you throw anything else you'd like to add in there.
Yeah, from the design standpoint, we're really just kind of working through the detailed design at each of the 4 sites and are working through all of the various regulatory approvals, permits, and then City of Des Moines board approvals that are necessary will actually be on the March 23rd Des Moines Parks and Rec Board for approval for all the sites. Working through Iowa DOT and Associated General Contractors of Iowa on setting up some kind of design constructability review meeting for the end of April. The hope is to gain some feedback to make the project more biddable and constructible, and hopefully realize some cost savings with that before we move into finalizing the project plans. So that's anticipated as well. And then as far as the dates, one of the things to point out is, originally we were targeting a September of this year letting with the project. We were never going to start construction until spring of 2022. The only reason for the September deadline was the authorization deadline built into the build grant for September 30th of 2021. With the COVID relief that was passed in December, that date actually changed. It actually was extended a year, but we're just going to take advantage of that and gain a few more months on the design side. Doesn't really affect the construction side, but are now targeting a December of this year letting, just to give a few more months for all the various permits and approvals and agreements that need to be put into place. But other than that, I think Todd covered everything else.
Gabe, thank you. Any questions for Gabe or Todd about water trails?
I've got one question, excuse me, and a comment. It sounds like there's some more documentation coming, and that's great. But what is left in the approval process for the MPO at this point?
As far as
anything, I mean, there's a lot of balls in the air with this, and a lot of different people throwing them up and supposed to be catching them. But it's in my understanding that the MPO is the one that's eventually on the hook for making sure none of the balls hit the ground. And I guess I'm just uncomfortable at this point taking on that responsibility for the MPO. And I was just wondering whether we had a special executive meeting or whatever you want to call it with someone representing each one of these agencies or groups, and then some sort of documentation that brings everything together. I mean, is something like that possible?
Sure, and that's partly what the sub-agreements will be, spelling out a little bit, but we can certainly schedule a special work session if that's desired. The MPO will be approving the contract with whoever the contractor is to build the project. The MPO will be approving, or a subcommittee of it will be approving the pay items and the change orders during the construction process. The funding for paying this will flow from, besides the bill grant funds being reimbursed, but just to pay the items will flow from Central Iowa Water Trails into an account that the MPO has access to that will pay the pay items with, then submit a reimbursement request to Federal Highway and get reimbursed on that.
Okay, well, and I don't want to speak for anybody else on this call, but if I had to explain the process to anybody, I couldn't do it. And I don't know that anybody on the policy committee could. So I guess I'm just concerned that everybody that's going to be voting on this one way or the other has all the information they need, or want, maybe is another way to say it too. But it just seems like there could be more and better communication as this thing goes along.
Yeah, we can bring a more detail in April now that got some draft of the sub agreements and sort of a flow chart diagram of how we see this process working.
Okay. And then my comment was, I don't know if anybody on the call here knows it, but I've sent a letter to the Central Iowa Water Trails stating that Ankeny would not be a party to the 2080 agreement. Just so everybody knows.
Gary?
Yeah.
Was that just a consensus of your council and you, or was there action on that?
It was a consensus of the council and myself.
All right.
There's no physical benefit to Ankeny. I mean, it shows us as 3 sites, but they're not really a fee. I don't know who came up with those sites, but they're not really a benefit to Ankeny.
The Parks Department came up with those sites, working with the Central Iowa Water Trails and team. But your
So
Parks-
Gary, you anticipate none of your residents using any of the attractions that are in the other member communities? You think no one from Ankeny? And so we would, you know, as the Central Iowa Water Trails look at Ankeny residents differently, since you won't be part of the regional agreement, so they would be charged differently, and you would be okay with that?
Well, I don't, first of all, I have never heard of anybody being asked if they want to be a part of this. I think this whole thing has been run on assumption by Central Iowa Water Trails. I know that there's a couple other communities that have no interest in participating either. And I just don't think they have their ducks in a row, and they're just assuming that everybody's going to fall into line on this. I mean, it's not just Ankeny.
Well, I think everyone assumed that it's a regional ask as far as working regionally for an attraction that's going to benefit the entire region, not just Des Moines, not just Johnston, not just Ankeny. If you only had 3 sites, it's everyone. It draws people to the region, and I believe that's what everyone was hoping, that everyone would participate. But I mean, I understand that what you're saying. I just wondered, do you feel that your residents aren't going to use any of the attractions that are available to them?
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Okay. So, but you think all of us should pay for all the attractions, but your residents should use it at the same cost that are going to be allowed? I mean,
take West Des Moines for an example. They built, I haven't physically seen it, but I've seen it on TV, and they built what looks to be a fabulous boathouse. And from what I understand, it's gotten a lot of use, but they did that on their own. Nobody else is paying for that. Nobody, they're not saying people from Des Moines can't use it, people from Ankeny can't use it. So
I understand, but that's part of the regional attraction with everyone. I mean, that's part of working regionally, and I understand where you're coming from.
But they're
That's a
maintaining,
decision that you made. That's okay.
they're maintaining that themselves. And like I say, I sent this letter on March 3rd, and we haven't, it's been crickets from Central Iowa Water since then. They didn't acknowledge receipt of it, I don't believe. So,
Gary, would you mind copying the MPO executive committee on that, or just?
I can, it's just a simple letter.
Yeah.
This is Sarah. I have a question going back to the finalization of the build grant. I do feel like I am on repeat because I am worried about how it's going to cash flow. So getting the understanding of and how we verify the money that is in the bank and is available to cover $25 million, and I do understand that that's not all at once, is going to be very important for me. We sat down and ran the numbers on liability simply for Pleasant Hill alone, should anything go awry, and for Pleasant Hill to, in a worst case scenario, either pay back or forfeit STBG dollars, it's to the tune of $400,000, and we are a very small city. So we all do this. We all look at return on investment, what we pay in, what we get out, but we have to have a recognition of what we are signing up for and what is that liability, and ensure that the cash flow is available to cover this. Because gosh, to have $400,000 to work on infrastructure and screw up one thing that the federal government isn't happy with, that bites. So I know I keep harping on it, but I really am looking for those plans and the proof that is coming around financial support. That is making me very nervous.
No, I understand, and we're pulling those together now as we get closer, and they're getting their finance agreements in place with, on the line of credit and how the accounts will work for drawing down money for the MPO to pay the invoices. So we'll have those in the next month or so before we sign the build grant. Those things would be in place.
And Todd, maybe you don't know this, but do you know, because we got an email from Central Iowa Water Trails setting hard deadlines and asking us all to pay by July. Is that a part of their cash flow model for this build grant?
I couldn't tell you that for sure. I can find out.
Okay.
With
And this is just extra commentary, but they did present to our council and we have extensive comments on the 28E. And so we are in the middle of finalizing a letter. And once that's out, I'll send it out to the mayors or anyone that was on that Central Iowa Water Trails email. So.
Hey, Chair.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Of course, today is a better day to have this conversation than a month from now, but I kind of feel like, pieces of it should have been had 4 and 6 months ago. And so if there is, some meeting or if there's, something being cooked up, outside of these meetings, which is fine. I do that too. I'm just saying if there's growing consensus among members of the executive committee or the board, we need to know that ASAP. And we need to know, Sarah, I appreciate the way you framed your comments that you have concerns about the 2080. We need to know what those are as well as, just the Central Iowa Water Trails Board. Because we have an important role in this. Mm-hmm. And, if there's, we got to figure this out ASAP. And, every day that goes by, the Central Iowa Water Trails Board and organization is spending money, on plans and designs and staff and contracts. Some of which they think will ultimately be paid for by this grant, which the MPO is required, I think, in order to get to it. And that's been going, and Todd, I don't mean to say this, in any inappropriate way about you, but we've had meeting after meeting on this. This has been on our agenda for a very long time, consecutive meetings, and Todd's just been relaying, the incremental steps that we're taking as an organization. And if we're going to modify those in any way, we need to know right away.
Yeah, and Chris, I will tell you that the comments I'm sending back are the exact same comments that I have shared every step in the process.
I try and be a realist in all these. I mean, I'm not going to start assuming that everybody's going to agree with me on every point, but we better know what each other's points are. And the scariest thing, I think, is what Gary said at the beginning, and that is that maybe we're years into this, and all of us on the board wouldn't have the same, 2-sentence description of how this is going to unfold. We better get on the same page and all understand it. And I do agree with Gary on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as the subcommittee that's going to approve any of the changes of any sort, that subcommittee is what we are right now, in my opinion, Todd. It would be the executive committee that's going to approve any you know, changes and everything, it needs to be approved through at least the executive committee, if not the full policy committee. But, you know, I know how construction goes, that we're going to need to come together with change orders and things like that pretty quickly. Then, you know, so I would think any subcommittee will be all of us. So
Yeah.
to Chris's point, we all need to know where our communities stand in this thing. And Gary, I appreciate your comments, and I'm glad that you know that you've sent a letter and you've said what you needed to say, and I respect that. And if there's anyone else, any of the other communities that are at least on this call or know of, then I think that we need to get to that sooner than later, because ultimately we are responsible for this build grant. And if it's not going to happen, then the build grant is null and void. We need to return it, or because we don't want to be responsible for it.
You know, there is, maybe somebody else on the call can help me, but there was the Central Iowa Water Trails had a Zoom meeting with mayors. I don't know whether it was a Milo meeting or what that was, but I specifically asked the question during that to, I can't remember who it was asked to, but somebody from Iowa Water Trails. I said, where are the other community? And this was only at the most 3 months ago. I said, where are the other communities on this? Has anybody signed on, jumped up and down, said, let's go, go, go? And she said, not yet. We're still working with people. And that included Des Moines. They had no clear direction from Des Moines on that either.
You got a letter from Des Moines, Gary.
Just the other day. This was 3 months ago.
Yeah, last month we gave you a letter from Des Moines.
But
it wasn't the other day. We wrote it last month.
But my point is these types of conversations have been going on for quite a while. And over the last, I don't know, how long has this thing been going on? 2 years now, maybe? I've asked both the MPO and Central Iowa Water Trails multiple times. You know, we had I don't know whether you call it a performer or what it was, but a projection of economic draw for this thing once completed, and it covered a huge territory, I thought. So I asked to see something of similar size, man-made, northern United States that is actually up and running and how that is actually performing. I was told by the MPO multiple times, yeah, we'll get that. I was told by Central Iowa Water Trails twice, sure, that's not a problem, we'll get that. And there's nothing. So, I mean, I'm very skeptical about how this thing has gone so far. I just
Gary,
have.
If I could just jump in real quick. I'm sorry we have not gotten anything specifically. We had also talked to Central Iowa Water Trails about getting something. Our understanding was that they were getting you that information. So we can follow up with them for you on that regard. But I would note that one of the sites that we went to visit at the very beginning of all this was Boise, Idaho. And while our group was there, they talked to some people from California who were driving up from California to use that facility. Just to get you an idea, you know, kind of what kind of a facility like this does actually draw from a pretty large area.
But there's a big difference between Boise, Idaho and the Des Moines Metro as far as
there is, but they were getting there just for the surf. That's what they come for. It's not like they were coming there for other reasons. They came there to surf because it's a consistent wave and it's year round. But we can get you more information on it. I thought as well, but we'll get the information to you, Gary.
I think what is often confusing on our water trails update is that there are different pillars of water trails. There is Central Iowa Water Trails, there is Polk County, there is Des Moines, there is the build grant. And really at the MPO, we are in charge of managing and getting through the process of the build grant. And where I believe there is confusion as we receive the updates of everything that is going on everywhere else in this system, where I believe we need to be very focused on the process and what's happening with the bill grant. I think that's also why there is confusion.
And we can try to separate those out a little more. So, these are the build things that we have to, that the MPO is explicitly responsible for. These are the other things going on with water trails in total.
Right.
We can separate that out more.
Hey, all good comments. Todd, you want to add anything else?
Not terribly anything else other than, the project is progressing, and I think we'll meet our schedules, especially with the extension that was applied for with Federal Highway. Everything's pulling in the right direction. So we get these agreements ironed out and get that information to everyone, and
yeah, it would be helpful. Mayor Lorenz asked for some information. Probably be helpful to get it out to all of the policy committee when he does get that information.
Yep.
All right. If there's not any other questions or comments, we will move forward to item number 19, report on the legislative update from Dylan.
Thank you. We have a few things to update you on here. If you have seen in the paper, there's the American Rescue Plan Act. This is another COVID relief bill. That's about 1.9 trillion. It looks like there's going to be money for cities. Some of this money, it's kind of open on what it can be used for, but there was infrastructure, including water, sewer, and broadband listed as eligible uses. There's also 30.5 million for public transit and 1.7 million for Amtrak. So those are the transportation related components of that. And that bill is not finalized yet, but it's working its way through and looks like it's going to be signed here pretty soon. I do believe for cities on the call, my understanding is if you go to the National League of Cities website, it'll show you what is intended to come to your community based on whatever formula is put into that bill. I haven't dug into that, but that's my understanding if you want to look into that yourself. I do want to mention a few things from the census too on the federal side. These aren't necessarily legislation, but are regulation proposals, if you will. So the Office of Management and Budget has proposed 2 changes that might be of interest to the MPOs that we're keeping an eye on. And these have to do with changes to how different census geographies are calculated. One has to do with how a metropolitan statistical area, or MSA, would be determined. Right now, the minimum urban area population to qualify is 50,000. They're proposing to increase that to 100,000. That wouldn't really affect our MPO or our metro area, but I believe that the Ames and the Dubuque metro areas could be affected by that. And there could be ripple effects, and I'll talk about that here in a second too. The other designation that's being proposed is how an urban area is calculated and determined. Right now, it's determined based on population density. They're proposing to change that to housing unit density. So basically what the density, how many housing units are in a given square mile for a census block determines whether that census block's in an urban area. Also some changes to the minimum population. Right now it's 2,500 persons to be in an urban area. They're going to change that to a combination of housing units or population. The reason for that is some changes that's going on with the census right now, but also housing units are a little easier to count, whether it just determines if the housing unit is there, not whether it's occupied, not how many people live in the housing unit. So it's just a little bit easier to figure out. They're also proposing to eliminate the distinction between urbanized areas, which are those greater than 50,000, and small urban areas, which are those above 2,500 but below 50,000. All of this is still in the proposal stage. They're taking comments on it. What's of interest to the MPOs are required in urbanized areas over 50,000. So the concern is if that number changes, that could bring more MPOs into the system, thereby diluting the amount of money that comes to the MPOs right now, or some other change like that. There's also a lot of grant programs such as CDBG, which is for 50,000 or greater, or maybe some other federal programs. In talking with some of our, the Association of MPOs or the National Association of Regional Councils, 2 organizations we belong to that work with MPOs, they're saying that's not the intent in their conversations with OMB and Census. It's not the intent to change qualifications for grants or designations such as MPOs, but it's something we need to watch because it could have a ripple effect on us. So just wanted to make you aware of that, and we're monitoring this, and we'll keep you apprised of anything that comes out of it.
Dylan, this is Stephanie. Can you go back to that?
Mhm.
So the MSA is proposed to increase to 100,000, but the MPOs will still be required in urbanized areas of 50,000. So
Yes, it'd be helpful probably if we had a map, but so the metropolitan statistical area for our area is 5 counties right now. And the urban area is smaller than that. It's basically the Des Moines metro area. And it's that distinction, the urban area, if that's above 50,000, that currently requires an MPO. So that one's a little bit more of the concern in my eyes, because if they change that and say, there's really no distinction now, anything is an urban area. And if the federal language says an urban area has to have an MPO, that means we might have a lot more MPOs. And again, that's probably not their intent, but something they'd want to make sure of.
A lot of the conversations I've heard is that they think there are too many MPOs, so they want to limit how MPOs are formed. So they're raising that threshold, possibly. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, and all of this does probably lead into, there's going to be a new transportation bill at some point, and that's where a lot of these changes get proposed as well. Last couple of times there was a transportation bill, there were calls to increase the population threshold for an MPO to 100,000 or 250,000, like that. So just wondering how it's all going to stack up and eventually, ripple effect on each other there.
okay, and is this something that we should, when the group goes to DC, is it something that should be talked about on the agenda?
Possibly, though I think the timelines for comments on this are probably going to be over by the time that DC trip comes up in September. So we'll dig into that some more and take a look at what needs to be done as far as contacting, Census or whoever's taking comments on this. Right now, it's just a proposal in the Federal Register, and it stipulates how to weigh in on that. But we'll have a better sense of what action needs to be taken.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. A couple other updates for you. Last month, we talked about the first COVID relief, or maybe not the first, but the one that was passed in December that has money going to the communities. Yesterday, the Iowa DOT Commission met and did approve this. So the formula and the process that they outlined last month that they were taking comments on was approved yesterday. So you should see that coming through for the cities through the road use tax fund here pretty soon. And on the county side, it's going to come through the secondary road or farm to market road programs. And then finally, at the state level, the first funnel was on Friday. So in looking through some of the legislation that we were tracking, most everything is still alive. There wasn't anything really new that we saw that needs to be added to this list. So this hasn't really changed. The only one that I don't believe made it through the funnel was the very last one there about the allowing a county to adopt and enforce stream buffers. But if there's any questions on either of those, I try to take them too. But that's all I have for you.
Stephanie again. So I'm very focused on that stormwater bill that was proposed. Is that dead, or is
the stormwater from the home builders that we talked about?
The wanted to do. I don't know if that ever went anywhere.
I don't know that was ever even introduced from what I've seen. So I think it was discussed, but I don't think it ever actually happened.
Thank you.
On the low speed bikes, I'm out of the loop on that, but are cities generally comfortable with that in the MPO as far as trails go and safety on that, or have we or any cities taken a stand on that?
I would defer. I don't know if Shiroshi has any insight on that. The only one that I'm aware of is back when e-bikes first kind of came out, Polk County Conservation Board did put a requirement that you have to have a license. So like our data bike, we have to go get a license or a permit to run that on the county trail system. But they're the only ones that I'm aware of that have done anything like that or had any sort of issue with having a motorized vehicle on trails.
They just can't go over a certain speed limit.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, I'm not aware of any discussions on this either. Probably something to just keep in mind as this bill moves forward.
Yeah, this is, I think, because the e-bikes are kind of a newer concept. This is just trying to fit them into the Iowa code, so there's no discrepancy of, are they bicycles, are they motor vehicles, are they motorcycles? So this is just saying they are bicycles and they should be treated the same as all other bicycles. Within, there's a stipulation on there of speed and horsepower and that kind of thing, I believe, but that's really what this is doing.
Thanks.
Dylan, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Dylan? All right, item 20 is a report on the MPO certification review update from Todd.
Yeah, thank you. You know, every 4 years we go through a process where Federal Highway Administration does a certification of the MPO and checks that we're doing all the processes, some of those that Dylan mentioned as part of the UPWP update, that we're doing those, we're doing them correctly, following the procedures we need to as an MPO. So we last did it in April 2017. Our next certification review is scheduled for the end of April, the 22nd through the 28th. Be some Zoom meetings on those days, probably half-day sessions with Federal Highway, Federal Transit, the DOT, and MPO staff. They may reach out to some of you to ask questions. They may not as well. It just kind of depends on what they're looking for at a given time. But we will come back and report on the process and how the certification goes. I just wanted to give you a heads up that it's happening.
Thanks, Todd. Any questions? Item 21 is a report on upcoming events from Allison.
Thank you. I'll fill in for Gunnar here. Just a couple for today. The Iowa Water Conference is going to be online again this year, coming up in April. There's a link there. Thank you. And then the Sussman lecture, which was, it's coming up as well. Nicole Hannah-Jones. She was going to be part of the Tomorrow Plain Speaker Series, but has been brought in on the fold of the Then, Now, When's sessions that are ongoing. And this is a capstone and also part of that Sussman lecture series that the Harkin Institute puts on April 8th in the evening. And it's also free, and there's a bit.ly there as well. And then last but not least, each year, HRDA puts on a Beyond the Bus Symposium. This year, they're specifically looking at inclusion in transit providers and programs, and it'll be virtual April 14th. It's an all-day affair, and there's a bit.ly there right there as well. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Thanks, Allison. Any questions? All right, item 22 is other non-action items of interest to the committee. Does anyone have anything?
I just wanted to ask, are we going to see the amendment being made as proven at the last meeting for Todd's contract?
Yeah, that will come back next month.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Scott has worked on it, and he'll get it to all of us before the meeting next month. Correct, Todd?
Correct.
Okay, great, thanks.
And then just one thing for me moving forward, hopefully, why don't we target maybe June to maybe try to get back in person and have the executive meeting and even possibly the policy meeting in June. Hopefully everyone will have their vaccine that wants it, and we can start moving forward to some sense of normalcy and get off maybe some of this Zoom. So that's what I'd like to see happen. I guess time will tell what if the rollout comes out. And I know, Todd, your health, we need to make sure that you get vaccinated, but hopefully by that time, that's going to give us enough time to make it work.
Sure.
Our next meeting date is April 7th at 11:30. If there's nothing else, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Aye.